Good evening, Shabbat Shalom, happy Friday. Welcome to Living Waters, falling deeper in love with God's Word. I am one of your hosts, Lauren Cruz.
And I'm Stephanie Pavlantos. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining
Shabbat
us.
Shalom.
That's right. And it is another Friday evening.
We're still in Romans,
Yep,
and we will be for a while.
That's right.
Because Romans is deep, and there's a lot of misunderstood material in here. And we're going to throw you some curveballs today, I think.
Yeah. We were talking just a few minutes before we jumped on, and our hope was to do one chapter a week, and it's too thick. It's just too dense of a passage. And
yeah,
so,
and this,
I think we've done okay. Two a week. Two breaking it into twos. I think.
Yeah. Again, Tom Bradford is the author. If you've ever seen him on Torah class videos and stuff, but he just explains everything. He goes like maybe 2 verses at the most, but he goes verse by verse. And right away he starts out on Romans 3:1-2, and there's a page and a half of commentary about those 2 verses, and so
that's right.
It's packed with good stuff.
That's right.
So
the thing he keeps over and over and over again is Romans was not written to all of Rome, but to a very individual group in Rome.
One church.
One church. And he reminds us over and over and over again that you have to have the mindset of a Second Temple ancient Near East person. I think that's obvious when we're trying to get the culture and understanding of things, but he's very good about saying, this was a belief very common until here, and then this became a belief until here, and in the Second Temple period, this was prevalent. So
right,
I think that's important because
and last week he even mentioned, he goes, whenever you read law in the Old Testament, you are reading Torah everywhere. You are reading in the Old Testament. But once you get to the New Testament and they start talking law, it could be Torah, it could be the law of sin and death, it could be the halakha, so the
moral law or
the
Torah
law, and the traditions of the elders, and that's something that Jesus made note of all the time. He would call them out for their piling and on above and beyond God's instructions. So he's mentioning, and that's where this author puts in the correct law that is being talked about. So it really helps you understand.
Very much so. And you have to pay attention. You have to look at the context of what he's speaking of and what would make sense. And based on, and we'll see that a little bit too, based on what Paul's saying, you're like, okay, well, it makes sense that he's refuting the oral law. That makes sense there. All right. Well, one thing he says when you start on chapter 3 is that there should never have been a page break or a chapter break. The chapter 3 actually starts with, then what advantage has the Jew, or what is the benefit of circumcision? And it's right in the middle of this whole discussion that Paul had just said in chapter 2 about there's no partiality, there's no one is greater. Being a Jew doesn't give you automatic salvation and righteousness. And so then he asks this question, okay, well, fine, if all that is true, it's kind of that nevertheless, or therefore, what's the therefore? Right. There shouldn't have been a break, because what it does is it chops the flow, and you're not realizing that chapter 3 really is still talking about the questions that are going on in chapter 2. And so the number one question is, fine, if my Jewishness does not make me righteous, if I, if I'm not a better person than a heathen, a pagan or a barbarian, what's the benefit of being a Jew? So that's kind of the whole premise of chapter 3.
Yeah, and he even at the end of 2 talked about what a real Jew is, and a real Jew is one who is a spiritual Jew, who is
a true Israelite. Yeah. We didn't really get into it. I have rather it is that Israel, and therefore Jews, was always about reflecting spiritual ideals of God, set apart people whose main task was to serve God and be faithful to him. and bring about his will on earth. God was faithful to them, and Israel was not. It was not clear that a Gentile, by declaring Abraham's God as his own God, could become part of the set apart people. But essentially, if any Gentile does come to the Lord, even in modern times, all he's doing is declaring that Abraham's God, the God of Israel, or is also his or her God. And so Israel, we've said this before, the idea of Israel being a separate people in a separate land across the world. It's not really what we believe the Bible is teaching. We believe that Israel is all of us, all believers.
Right. Israel it's not that you're Jewish.
Right.
You don't have to be from the house of Judah or the house of Israel. It's
right.
that, So Israel are all people who are in covenant with the Lord, who have been grafted in.
Right.
Because some of those branches, like we talked about last week, have been broken off because they're not in covenant with Yeshua. So those branches have been broken off.
Right.
All right. Yeah.
Well, we are on page 88 and 89 if you do have the book. If you don't have the book, we're right at chapter 3, Romans chapter 3.
Yeah, so there's a lot in here that he even just says in these first, even in the introduction. Did you read something? Did you read that middle paragraph on the other hand being Jehovah's set apart people?
Yeah, I just read that.
Okay, that's what I thought you read, but I couldn't find it until just now.
I haven't read anything on chapter 3.
Okay, so then he starts on the last paragraph on 89. Throughout this chapter, we see Paul struggling, as do we, to define the place of the law. And I thought that was good because he's like, he is struggling. And he said the reason for the struggle is because the place and purpose of the law within the Second Temple Judaism has become corrupted and was now not being utilized as God intended. You didn't read that, did you?
I didn't, but I have that underlined in my book as well.
And so he makes a point of saying Yeshua's Sermon on the Mount was largely about recovering the true purpose and meaning of the law of Moses. Now we have to understand, we call it the law of Moses, but it's actually the law of God and the law of Christ. They're the same. All three of those are the same. And a lot of people want to make the law of Christ something different than the law of God. And it's not different. It's the same thing. Law of God, law of Moses, law of Christ, they're all the same. But he says Yeshua is not trying to reform or recast the law itself. In fact, he stated straight away that not the tiniest speck of the law would change until heaven and earth passed away.
Exactly.
Rather, he was trying to reform the religion or the Judaism that was misusing and misunderstanding the law. And I think that's huge. He was trying to take them back to the pure understanding of God's instructions. Because they had added so much to it. And
so he calls it the halakha, and we call it the oral law. So, and even when reading, I was reading when Jesus healed the blind man, and they were angry with him, and he spit and made in John. It's in the book of John. And they were like, oh, he's healed on the law. How dare you?
On the Sabbath,
On the Sabbath. He's healed on the Sabbath. How dare you? He's of the devil. And the whole thing, you're allowed to show mercy. According to Torah, you can show mercy on the Sabbath. And you can feed your animals on Sabbath. You can
get your animal out of
a ditch. You can help someone. You can pick and eat pieces of grain and just, kind of meander through the field and eat things as long as you're not harvesting into a basket. And what they had done was they had put so many restrictions around the Sabbath and the law that they're using that as a way. Oh, I gotcha. You're breaking the law. But he wasn't breaking the fundamental law of God, the Torah.
And that's a huge, huge thing that you brought up, because we have to look at it through the eyes of the Jewish people and through the eyes of Jesus. And he was trying to correct the Jews. How they, like you said, how they had made fence laws and added laws, because, and we've said this before on the show, but when the rabbis studied and they were given any kind of revelation or understood anything, then it became more important than Torah.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus said, no, absolutely not. That's wrong. And I will not tolerate that. So, and he was always trying to correct them, as is Paul.
Right. I know a lot of people think that Paul and Jesus don't have the same message, but
I know
they do.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, they're not at odds with each other. Yeah.
That there's a gospel that Jesus gave to his disciples, and then there's a gospel that Paul gives to the Gentiles.
Right.
If we believe that, we're already behind the 8 ball. We're already messed up. Our theology, everything else.
So Paul says, and I don't want to jump ahead, but I thought this was great because we talked a little bit about this before. It said, this is on page 90. Paul speaking to the Jews, they had to unlearn much of what they believed before Paul could teach them the divine truth. And ironically, it's precisely what's happened. I know we've said that. We've said that 3 times already.
We have, because they believed that they were under no wrath. They were born righteous.
Right.
And he's like, there's no one righteous. No, not one. That's
right.
I don't know where that is. I said it, but that I did. I was like, where is that in the Bible?
It's in Romans, I think.
Yeah, I do think it is. But he's like, no one's righteous. So you guys are wrong.
Yeah.
And wrath is going to come to you too. So don't think you're getting by because you're part of the tribe of Judah or the tribe of Benjamin or whatever.
Well, and then he says too, so here's Romans 3, 1 and 2. It says, then what advantage has the Jew? What is the value of being circumcised? Much in every way. In the first place, the Jews were entrusted with the very words of God. And the point, the commentary point he really says is, what are we supposed to do? Are we to abandon the law and abandon it all and give it instead to Israel's enemies, the Gentiles? What sort of God is that? He said it would be forever, and then made a new set of rules given to the Gentiles. So this is possible if indeed what happened. Why should any of us believe that at some point God might not revoke a new covenant and give yet another new one with an entirely different terms from the previous 2, or that perhaps that the one that doesn't even involve Christ? So he's being like using, I mean, I would think that's kind of hyperbole, like what a great example or exaggeration. But honestly,
it's what we do.
It could happen, like.
Yeah, I mean, if we believe that, where was that? I remember reading that.
Page 91.
Okay.
Like right in the middle.
Okay, I have that then. I have that starred.
It says Christianity honestly believes that God is broke. His promises to Israel revoked not 1, but 2 covenants, and he said he would be forever. So
yeah. And all he did was actually renew, and we've said this before, he renewed the Abrahamic covenant, because the Abrahamic covenant was based on favor, but renewing one covenant, as Galatians tells us, does not renege another, does not revoke another covenant because you make a new covenant, because covenant is about death, is about life and death. The only way a covenant can be broken is in death.
Right.
So God didn't die. Now Jesus did, but he had to die for the sin and actually to make and to renew a covenant. So that's like there's a lot in there, and I'm not saying that that's all easy just to understand. There's a lot of depth in that, just what I said. But I think that we need to go that, you need to explore that more. Not you, but our audience.
Yes.
Because it's important to understand that he says, and remember Jesus' words, he said, I came for the Jews. I came for the house of Israel. My lost sheep are the house of Israel. And honestly, that's why he came, to bring them back. But they've been living in with the Gentiles. So we've even said this, when Paul is talking, he is also talking in all of his books that he wrote, all of his letters. He's talking to the Jewish people in that city as well as the Gentile believers. So he's just as concerned about his Jewish brothers as Peter is, and as Jesus
big
was.
time. I think so too. We've always painted him as the Gentile witness or missionary, and yes, he is. However, and he even says this in here, he calls himself a Jew, and Paul wasn't here teaching as a Christian, and that comes up a little later in a couple more.
And there's a lot of people who don't understand Paul, and like you'll see, even Torah observant people will slam Paul because they believed what the church has said, that Paul converted somehow. Yeah. Paul didn't convert. We've said that dozens of times.
No, none of them did. None of the apostles.
Yeah, they didn't convert from Judaism. They became a messianic believer.
Right.
So they believe that their Messiah has come. That's all. That's all the change. Yeah. They no longer waited for the Messiah. They recognized he came.
Right. They still celebrated all the feasts.
Yeah.
And as did Paul. There's so many references in there, like, I went and I did the temple sacrifice on behalf of the Nazarite vow. And I mean, there's all kinds of references. Yes. I have a question, Stephanie. I have a question. At the bottom of page 89, when we read that the reason for the struggle is the place and purpose of within the law of the Second Temple in Judaism, and that how God intended Yeshua's Sermon on the Mount was largely recovering the true purpose and meaning of the law. I know you've done a lot of studies. Sermon of the Mount, but more the Beatitudes. That's not the same.
It doesn't replace the law, but what it does is it shows us, it emphasizes, because you can actually go and find the Beatitudes in the Old Testament. You can find almost every single one of them mentioned somewhere in the Old Testament and even in Deuteronomy. So he's emphasizing those is because that's kingdom life. Okay. This is how we behave in kingdom life. But we're the one that says, you will inherit the earth. Well, in Hebrew, it would be you'll inherit the land.
Right.
They're the same sentence. So who was given a promise to inherit the land? The Jews. And starting with Abraham, he was told he would inherit this land property. He was given a royal grant covenant. And so that just continues through generations of his offspring. And now where we go now, and that's where I'm sorry, you will probably open a can of worms with me. But that's where we get into the renewed Abrahamic covenant, because what's the land we're going to inherit? The kingdom of God, the new earth.
Right.
So the promise is the same for us as it was.
I want to put a pin in what you're saying, because he kind of goes into a little bit of that in this. So I want to put a pin in that, and if it comes back and
that's fine. I said what I wanted.
No. You're reminding me of a lot of things that I read in the commentary. So that are going to come up later. So okay, all right.
So he, just on 90, he says down here, the question is, what is the advantage has the Jew? And he says, and of course the question means, considering what has been previously said, what advantage does Jew have over Gentile, if any? And he says, then he goes, now, if the Gentile disciples of Christ answered this question after reading what Paul had said about the equality of Jews and Gentiles in the first 2 chapters of Romans, let me just skip ahead. No advantage whatsoever would be the right answer. Right. And I'm sad to say that's what most Gentiles would say. I should say that's what the Gentiles would say. And he goes, and I'm sad to say that is generally what a good portion of the church has done. Is that there's no advantage to being a Jew.
Yeah, he does get into a lot of the replacement theology too, and dispensationalism and supersessionism. He does talk a lot about that, and because he asks it this way: Israel is still God's special people, and if God has abandoned them because they broke the covenant, or what in theology circles called supersessionism. So we'll talk about that too.
And if he has to abandon them because they broke covenant, how many times would he have to abandon us?
We would be kicked to the curb.
Yeah, exactly. So you
Yeah.
have to keep it all in perspective.
Mhm.
We would do, I mean, I look at how they complained when they had to go 3 days without water and they were thirsty in the desert. You're in a desert and you haven't had water for 3 days. Well, yeah, I'd be complaining too.
Mhm.
I don't think I'd be like, yay, we have no water. I'd be like, let me go back because I know where there's water backward.
Right.
Back where we came from.
Right.
I'll go back there.
Mhm.
You just don't realize that what they went through, we would do no different. So
Mhm.
we would be no different.
I
So
agree.
Romans 3:3, you want to go
Yeah,
ahead?
if some of them were unfaithful, so what? Does their faithlessness cancel God's faithfulness?
And yeah, so I had this whole paragraph marked, but but basically he's saying, but if Israel was unfaithful, does the lack of faithfulness cancel God's faithfulness towards them? And he says that, my friends, is a very volatile question because it involves the issue of whether Israel is still God's special people or if God has abandoned them. And that's kind of what we were saying.
Right.
And then he says, for centuries, including in our day, much of the institutional church answers this question with a resounding yes, it does. But then he goes and he answers that question in 3 and verse 4.
Right. So the question is, heaven forbid, or we hear, may it never be. There's different translations.
So that's the answer to
Romans heaven 3. Forbid. No, it's no. God would be true even if everyone were a liar, as the Torah says, so that God may be proved right in your words and win the verdict when you are put on trial.
So that comes from Old Testament. He's actually cool, and that's also cool. He actually tells you where
and what.
Quoting Old Testament.
Word
for word sometimes, and if we don't know the Old Testament well enough to recognize it when it's being quoted sometimes.
Right.
And he says, if some Jews failed by being unfaithful to God, that certainly does not affect God's faithfulness to them. Let's be clear that this faithfulness of God has to do with his being faithful to the covenants that he made with Israel. So while Israel broke their end of the deal, God kept his and continues to keep it. Thus, the covenants of Abraham and Moses remain intact and effective, not because Israel upheld them.
They didn't.
It's because God, the guarantor of the covenants, upheld them.
Right.
And that's basically when we say that that it has, all the laws have been done away with, we're saying that God no longer upholds them.
I know.
That's what we're saying.
I know. That's
wrong.
It's wrong. Yeah.
So, and to what he says, heaven forbid. You want to explain that? What heaven forbid means?
So he said it's a Greek in the Greek word. I'm not even going to say it. The Hebrew translation is chalila. It's a very passionate, strong expression of intense negativity. It basically means a curse on it or away with it. So it's often more translated. So this is why you'll see some English translations might say God forbid or heaven forbid, because in English those are intensely negative terms. But in reality, the words God, heaven, and forbid are not there. They're not in the text when you go to look at it. So he's making a strong statement. And
he says it's a standard rabbinic response to the Talmud, in the Talmud, when one rabbi disagrees with another. So this is a common response. So he's very much playing out, like saying the same things that he would be saying if he were face to face with another rabbi and arguing with them over scripture.
Right. Well, and we've talked about how Paul is trying to set up this whole straw man idea of having, the diatribe going with him, where he's anticipating questions that the not real person is asking, and he's answering. I think he made a comment too, like Paul never met this group of people, so
Mm-hmm.
he never met this group of people. So he's not necessarily responding to a specific
Exactly.
letter. He's just writing, like, in general, things that he's heard about them and the questions that they have and questions that he's come in, bumped up against in other Asia Minor, Rome, other
And
areas.
it's funny because you see Paul ask a question and then basically shoot it down. And we see that over and over. But when we get to 1st and 2nd Corinthians, he's gotten letters. And now he may be quoting them and then shooting it down. But we don't see quotes around something. So
they didn't have the quote marks. Or he doesn't say, now, about that question you asked me.
Regarding women.
He doesn't have that
tongues,
question.
regarding, whatever.
Yeah.
He doesn't say that at the head of his letter.
I wish he would. Make him easier.
It's like, you need to write the way we read.
That's right.
But we don't. But he doesn't. So then he just says that verse 5 enters us into a fascinating theological whirlpool. So now this is going to open up even more. So you want
even more. Okay. So here's what it says. Now, if our unrighteousness highlights God's righteousness, what should we say? That God is unrighteous to inflict his anger on us? I'm speaking here the way people commonly do. Heaven forbid. Else, how would God judge the world?
Right. So good questions, because he's like, so when we sin and we look unrighteous, we just show how righteous God is by saving us.
Right.
No.
It's kind of the same question. Should I sin so that grace might abound?
Yeah.
No, that kind of theology. And Paul says, by the way, no, heaven forbid on that one.
Noted that too.
Yeah. That's actually called licentiousness. I don't know if some people know that, but licentiousness is the idea of, I can sin, God's just going to forgive me anyway.
Right.
So no, I've got
God's
protection.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there who believe, like, hey, I've been saved from all sin, from my past and my future, so I can do whatever I want.
Right.
There's nowhere in the Bible that Paul says that. And if you think he did, you're misunderstanding what he wrote,
Right.
So you have to understand that Paul is having an argument with himself. He
is. Yeah. All right. You said you had a lot underlined in this area.
Yeah.
I'm going to bow this to you.
Oh, no.
This is a big one.
He just says, oh, boy. So he just says here at the very bottom of 93, he said, thus Paul would say, God be unrighteous to inflict his anger on us, to which Paul answers, heaven forbid. If this was true, how could God judge the world? So he's basically saying, again, you read that part about heaven forbid, but he kind of goes on. I just said, but what he's saying, heaven forbid too. He is not replying to whether God is unrighteous to inflict his anger, but rather he is saying heaven forbid to the entire line of reasoning. That is, it is a false reasoning to think that God's righteousness can only be established in proportion to mankind's sinfulness. And so he follows that up with heaven forbid. If God has to measure his faithfulness in proportion to mankind's unfaithfulness, can he judge the world? So he's basically saying God's faithfulness must be demonstrated by mankind's unfaithfulness is absurd. And he goes on to give an example. He says, but he's basically calling the whole argument absurd by saying heaven forbid. Everything in 5 and 6, he's basically saying that's an absurd argument because he's heard it.
Paul is saying that. Paul is saying it's
an absurd argument. And he even says, he goes, I'm speaking here the way people commonly do. Right. So he's heard these arguments.
Right.
And he's basically saying, no.
No. All right. So. Anything else in that chunk before I do 7 and 8?
Nope. Go right ahead.
Okay. All right. Romans 3, 7 and 8. But you say, if through my life God's truth is enhanced and brings him greater glory, then am I still judged merely for being a sinner? Indeed, why not say, as some people slander us by claiming that we do say, let us do evil so that good may come of it. Against them, judgment is a just one.
So again, he's saying bad argument, stupid sayings here. If I sin, let's do evil so that good may come of it. Mm-hmm. No, because what did Joseph say way back in Genesis? He said, basically, what Satan meant for evil, God meant for good. That's not the same as what he's saying, because that came to my mind.
Yes.
What Satan meant for evil, God turned it around and used it for good. And he does that. He's good at that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that let us do evil so God can turn around and do good out of it, make good from it. They're not the same.
No.
Because it's not about us being evil. It's about how good he is. And he wants us to be like him. Mm-hmm. So,
okay, this is what I loved. I love this part. This is Romans 3:9. So are we Jews, and I circled the word we Jews because this is Paul. Paul is speaking. Are we Jews better off? Not entirely. For I have already made the change that all people, Jews and Gentiles alike, are controlled by sin.
Yeah.
So he says he is a Jewish believer in Yeshua, not a Christian. To those who think Paul has converted and thus become a Christian, which at all times referred to a Gentile, is yet another proof that he did not. He is a Jewish believer. He is a Jewish believer. So,
in Yeshua.
Yeah.
So he believes in Yeshua. And he just says, in light of believing Jews having an advantage over believing Gentiles in every way, does this make us Jews better off than our Gentile brothers in Christ? To which Paul answers the straw man, not entirely. Mm-hmm. So, and then he goes on, a hierarchy of superior Jews versus inferior Gentiles. Did I say that right? Superior Jews versus inferior Gentiles was never God's intention. Mm-hmm. He wants us to be equal, but we have to remember that God entrusted them first.
Right. And that, I mean, I know we're going to get there eventually, because Paul does address, like, these are the benefits of being a Jew. And he kind of gets there eventually. And he starts, I think he's kind of turning the corner now, because Romans 3, I don't want to jump ahead. I'm not going to read any of this, but in Romans 3:10-18, he's quoting Old Testament scripture over and over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
To show. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't, I was highlighting all throughout this because I think he just makes such good points about everything. And I do encourage people to get this, because I think that it really does.
I think it's a good commentary. It is. I think if you're going to have, I don't want to say there's nothing in here I haven't bumped up against that I'm like, I don't believe that. But I'm tracking with them. Like, I'm like, yeah, that totally makes sense. And it clarifies, like, I've had a lot of questions, because I've come from the church. I've come from, staunch Christian Sunday school believer. And I've had to wrestle with some of these, and I like the way he's answering them. It definitely makes sense to me. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right.
There are a lot of comments here.
I know we do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We're it's hard to read and talk and keep up.
I know. I apologize.
So if you see me glancing over that way,
I'm reading the side of the screen.
Yeah. So he kind of jumps ahead to no, he didn't, right? Romans 3. You said that this was all Tanakh here.
Yeah.
In Romans 3:10-18. Mm-hmm. And so then he kind of just talks about these verses, and then that's where we kind of skip a whole chunk of scripture. And so this was good. Mm-hmm. Do you want to read this, and then we'll talk about it a little bit?
I can. Yeah. Do you want me to read 10-18?
Yeah.
All of them? Okay. All right. Romans 3:10-18, as the Tanakh puts it, There is no one righteous, not even one. That's where you got that verse.
Yeah. I knew I was quoting something.
It's in there somewhere. No one understands. No one seeks God. All have turned away, and at the same time become useless. There is no one who shows kindness, not a single one. Okay. And then there's another section. Their throats are open graves, and they use their tongues to deceive. Vipers' venom is under their lips. Their mouths are full of curses and bitterness. Okay. Then there's another verse. Their feet rush to shed blood. In their ways are ruin and misery, and the ways of shalom they do not know. And then there's a final verse, and it says, there is no fear of God before their eyes. So 1, 2, 3, 4 different verses.
Yeah. So he says verses 10 through 12 are from Psalms 14 and 53.
Yeah.
Verse 13 is Psalms 5. I'm not going to give all the verses. And 140. Right. Verse 14 is verse 18. I'm sorry, I skipped something. Verse 14 is Psalm 10. Verses 15 through 17 are Isaiah 59, 7, 8, and Proverbs 1.
And Psalms.
And verse 18 is Psalm 36.
Right.
So that's amazing to me, because here he is. He's quoting in these 8 verses, he's quoting a bunch of the Tanakh, a bunch of the Old Testament.
Right.
And he's putting it all together as if it's one.
Yeah, he says the flow is that no one is righteous or kind. So here's the thing. I always say, whenever there's a reference to an Old Testament verse, it's kind of treated like a hyperlink. You should go back and you should read that verse, but you should also read the context of that verse, because the tone and the mood of what's being said in that gets pulled forward with that. Like, I'm trying to make a point. I'm not just quoting verses to make the point, but I want you to see how that verse is being used in the Old Testament. So he says, the flow is that no one is righteous or kind. Okay, righteousness unto God, kind unto his fellow man. So no one is adhering to the 2 principles that undergird the entire Torah. Love your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and love your neighbors as yourself. And then further, anyone who sins is not by deed, certainly by their word, but comes up from the throats and exists in the mouth. And everyone has evil in their lifestyle rather than only good. I can't tell you the number of people I've spoken to who won't give their lives to Messiah, but do firmly believe they're going to heaven because they're basically good people. So,
and that this last part before he goes into Deuteronomy 30, he says, I
have that underlined too.
He said a lot of people believe that the law was from inception a faulty covenant. And he says, I disagree. Ideally, it is possible to obey everything in the Torah. The problem for humanity is that from a practical point of view, our evil inclinations are simply too powerfully developed, for us to fully overcome them. From a technical standpoint, we can obey all God's moral laws. And in fact, during the 1,000-year reign of Christ, we will. And then he quotes Deuteronomy 30, 11 through 14. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. For this mitzvah, or these commandments, which I am giving you today, is not too hard for you. So this is from God himself. It's not too hard for you.
Too hard for you.
It is not beyond your reach. It isn't in the sky, so that you need to ask who will go up to the sky and bring it to us and make us hear it so that we obey it. It's not in the sea. He says, on the contrary, the word is very close to you, in your mouth, even in your heart. Therefore, you can do it.
You can do it. Yeah.
So that's good, because I've heard people say it's such a burden. No one's ever said the Torah was a burden. No one, except for man. Mankind has said that. Pastors in churches have said that, but they're not quoting scripture when they say that, because Jesus fully says, my burden is light. And that he's talking about Torah. That is a verse that is referring to Torah. And he says that it is not a burden. He says the exact opposite. The burden is what the Jews were doing and layering Mishnah, layering Talmud, layering the traditions of the elders all on top of the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
They were giving hundreds and hundreds of more instructions that became a burden to keep. That was the burden.
Right.
So
I agree. Yeah, I had all that underlined too. Just so you know, Stephanie and I don't talk during the week. And when we come and sit down, we have almost the same stuff underlined. So
we always do. We think a lot alike.
Always had that. Yep.
So
that's funny. Okay. Romans 3:19. Moreover, we know that whatever the Torah says, it says that those living within the framework of the Torah, in order that every mouth may be stopped and the whole world be shown to deserve God's adverse judgment.
Yeah, and this is one of those verses where he actually inserts Torah, because that's exactly what Paul is referring to.
The specific one, right? Mm-hmm. And he just says, verse 19 is kind of a summary meant to hammer home the point that whatever living within the law, the Jews, or living apart from the non-Jews, the Gentiles, everyone deserves God's wrath, and he's made this point before in chapter 2. So every mouth being stopped is meant to depict a defendant in the courtroom that has been stopped. Nothing can be said.
And isn't that, that's what you read there. Every mouth may be stopped. And so, and I thought that was neat, because he says it's like the evidence against him is now so overwhelming that he has nothing left to say. Right. So every mouth will be stopped because one day, if we're not following God, if we're not walking in Yeshua's footsteps,
right,
he's going to show us that you can't even defend yourself. The evidence is so overwhelming. Mm-hmm. You're going to just drop to your knees and fall on your face, because that's the only thing you can do. So I think that's really a very, really important verse right there. So,
yeah, he's got another reminder here. Same thing. The author has been, it says, recall chapter 3 is being aimed very much at Jews, because Jews in this era, the Second Temple era, sincerely believed that simply being a Jew exempted them from God's judgment and wrath. So again, he makes this point over and over again and refers us back to the thinking and the understanding of Second Temple. So
this guy says, I am Israel.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And he's I thought it said my spirit, but God's spirit, right? He's our voice. He's the one who speaks through us when we give him permission to do that. Yeah. So, but that was good. We just have to keep remembering that he's talking to the Jews. He's talking to the Jews. And there's a lot of denominations who use Romans to say that this is all written to the Gentiles. And it sounds like it is, but you have to do careful study and understand of who's his audience, who is he directing his words to. And when you understand that.
And he says, so are we Jews better off? I mean, there's little clues in there that say he's talking to a Jew. He's saying we, so that means his audience has got to be a Jew as well. So he's not only saying we Jews, we do, but the audience.
When you read it the other way, it sounds like he's telling the Gentiles Jews are bad. We don't need them. But then he'd have to exclude himself from that because so context is everything.
It is. So,
Romans.
All right, we are up to Romans 3:20. It says, "For in his sight, no one alive will be considered righteous, and on the ground of legalistic observance of Torah commands. But what Torah really does is show people how sinful they are." I wanted to read that. In my NASB, it says, "Because by the works of the law, no flesh will be justified in his sight. For although the law comes through the knowledge of sin." Because I've heard that a lot, what good is the law? It reveals sin, so we know what is sin. But Paul is very clear here and even previous and in other books, he's very clear. The law never justifies us, sanctifies us, or saves us.
Or righteousness. He puts on righteousness.
It doesn't impart righteousness onto us. So he's really clear. Even if you want to be a Torah pursuant person in today's day and age, and everybody's like, don't follow that, it's a burden and you can't be saved through the law. It's not, it never has been taught that you can be righteous through the law. So that's all part of the oral tradition that was added.
He quotes Psalm 143, 1 and 2. I'll just read this. He says, Adonai, hear my prayer, listen to my pleas for mercy. In your faithfulness, answer me, and in your righteousness. Don't bring your servant to trial, since in your sight no one alive would be considered righteous. So Paul is quoting Psalm 143 in Romans 3:20. And so he says even King David knew there is no one alive who can be considered righteous based on their works and deeds.
Exactly.
So, and nobody is saying that. Nobody at all is saying that. But there is a place for the law. And there's a part in here that he says, and I'm jumping ahead, but he makes the comment in the commentary. He said, if you had to choose between food, water, and air, which two would you choose, and which one would you give up?
Yeah.
He goes, so the same with gospel and Torah.
Yeah.
They're essential together. The gospel and the Torah are essential for a spiritual life, just like food, water, and air are essential for a physical life.
Yeah, you have to have all of it.
Yeah. So he's saying Torah is not bad. It's essential, but it's not what saves us. That's the main point, but it's still essential to our growth. So this part was good, I thought. And then when you get into Romans 3:21 and 22a, this was like, I actually wrote this. I mean, I'm sorry. When I read this.
I know you can't see. I know there's too much light there. Yeah, there's so much marking in my book.
Yeah, there's all this. And then I put stars by everything. When I really want to make sure I
stars.
Okay, and so I took pictures and sent it to a friend. And Deanna. I'm like, Deanna, you got to read this.
I know. We have about 10 minutes. Do you want to jump into this?
I think we could just jump into this part. I think we could.
Okay. All right. So Romans 3:21, 22. By now, quite apart from the Torah, okay, we've got different law, the right law. Apart from Torah, God's way of making people righteous in his sight has been made clear. Although the Torah and the prophets give their witness as well. And it is a righteousness that comes from God through the faithfulness of Yeshua, the Messiah, to all who continue trusting. We're opening a whole bunch right now.
It is. And so this, I'm just going to say this real fast. This guy asked if we have TikTok. We both have TikTok. So
we do. We both have TikTok. You
can, I guess, find us on there. So it's hard to discuss everything here. But yeah, so this is really good. So the righteousness that comes from God through the faithfulness, and you brought this up last week.
I did.
Do you remember?
I did.
So she brought this up. She started opening this can of worms. So let me ask you a question to introduce all this.
Okay, here it comes.
So if you based your salvation on your faith, how's your salvation?
Okay, well, he explains it great.
He does.
Okay, if my salvation is based on how strongly I have faith in God or Christ or Yeshua, I'm going to have to be honest, it ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
Because there's days I do not feel the presence of God. There are days that you are thick in the muck of life, and how can God be in this? Why would he do this to me?
Yeah.
Why, I'm a terrible person. I can't be used by God. There are days. Yeah. There are days.
And so right now, my husband and I are involved in a lawsuit. Right. And we're being sued. And so it's like, and everybody thinks they're innocent, and I'm no different. So I'm not going to go into it. I can't. Right. But the fact of the matter is, there are days I'm like, why me, Lord? Why us? Right. What did we do? And there are days that my faith, I'm just like, Lord, I might as well just quit now. I mean, I'm just so done with this. Why? I don't even, there are just days I think that way. And so if my faith is not strong, according to our definition that we are saved by faith, then my faith sucks sometimes.
Mine does too.
So,
yeah.
And that would mean my salvation would ebb and flow with my faith.
Right.
But that's not what it's based on, and this is where he goes.
That's right.
Because he said, many doctrines interpret the Bible to say that it is our faith in Messiah that saves us. That our salvation is more or less dependent on our level of faith. It's not. It's not. Our salvation is determined by our trust in the one who is faithful.
Our trust in Messiah's faithfulness.
Because he's faithful. He is perfect. His faith never wavers. It never ebbs and flows, to borrow her.
Yeah.
And so that's what saves our trust in him to be faithful is what saves us.
Yeah. Do you want to read that bottom part?
Oh, yeah. I got all this.
There's a lot.
So this is what I have starred. Rather, it is that if we are to be righteous or justified by God, we must place our trust in Messiah's own faithfulness. That's what I said, but I'm just reading it. Messiah's faithfulness was and is perfect. Biblically, faithfulness is about being obedient to God. Faithfulness is about being obedient to God and to his covenants. So to be unfaithful is to break a commandment or a term of a covenant. To be unfaithful is another way of saying to sin. Our human faithfulness will always be flawed, if not intermittent, like she said. If we have to rely on our faith for salvation, we're in trouble. I can trust, but still not have sufficient faith to be perfectly obedient to God.
That's right.
Our faith will be sufficient for some circumstances, but not for others. So do you want to read more of that?
So in lieu of our faith, we are instructed to trust in Christ's faith. And I'll tell you what, too, when I'm reading through this, if we are dependent on our faith, then it becomes a works.
Yeah.
We can't depend on the strength of our ability to be obedient and, our trust in then it becomes works. And it's not the case. Okay. But not for others. So in lieu of our faith, we're instructed to trust Christ's faith. If we trust him, if we trust him, God will substitute Yeshua's perfect faithfulness for our imperfect faith. That is the picture that the sacrificial system in the law of Moses paints for us. Animals that are 100% sinless and thus can be said in Bible speak that have the perfect faithfulness. They can be substituted for our own human lives so that the full of sin and unfaithfulness. And I don't want to keep going, but
that's fine.
Basically saying, are you trusting in Yeshua's faithfulness? And that's a yes or no question, right? That's not either you trust and believe and you trust him. You either trust him or you don't. I was trying to, when I was reading through Andrew's Bible, he had a footnote there and it said, the word doubt isn't even a Hebrew word. There is no word for doubt in Hebrew because it's either yes or no. You either believe it or you don't. You either believe in God and believe in the power of God and believe in everything that he's going to offer us, or you don't. So faith, that if you want to layer the layer, faith then, if we're dependent on our faith, then that opens up doubt. Because it ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
It comes and goes.
So I thought that was such a eye-opening thing because we are stuck. We are stuck on learning the way that we've been taught, and we can just continue to repeat what we've heard.
Right.
But it's not, and the thing is, and it's not our fault. I'll say that because it's what we've been taught, and it's how Scripture has been defined for us.
Right.
But when you open your book to Galatians and it's talking about faith, I think in Galatians 3 or 4, it's talking about the faith of Yeshua. It's not talking about our faith.
Our faith, right.
It's always referring to the faith of Yeshua, but we miss that because certain words are taken out and replaced to make it easier to understand. Mm-hmm. But the words in there, it would actually say, when the faith came. Yeah. But what does it say? It says when faith came. Right. Meaning like we think it's our faith that came. But no, mm-hmm. but even that's what kills me. Because we even saw when we were doing Julie Zine's book, mm-hmm. how things like that are actually non-gender oriented become gender oriented when it's translated into English. Mm-hmm. This happens a lot, and you guys, you have to read the word for yourself, and you have to study the languages. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying you learn Greek and learn Hebrew. We've got lots of things.
You can use all kinds of tools, though. Even go. Just look up a word. I say this all the time. Go look up that word because there's usually 2 or 3 definitions and nuances and how often is it used and all of it. So,
we just have to study. And that's what, and ask him. I mean, I know somebody, and I probably told this story because we're almost out of time. We have about a minute and a half, but somebody said when it's talking about the my word will never pass away. She said, that's Yeshua. Yeshua will never pass away. And, later when I was praying about that, the Lord said, no, she is wrong. He corrected. Mm-hmm. He corrected it for me so I would not believe what she was saying. Mm-hmm. And he said, it says, my words will never pass away. That is not my son. Yeah. That is my words in my book. Right. You know, and he's talking about his Torah. His Torah will never pass away. Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jesus says, and I don't know if this is the verse you're referencing, not a jot or tittle will fade, and
heaven and earth will. It's all part of that.
And so the earth is still kicking. We're still here.
Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. That's the verse. Right. And I think he quotes it here at the end of this chapter. Till heaven and earth pass, and you said that, but then it says somewhere else that heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Right. So,
all right. Well, we need to head out. We need to head out. So we're going to pick it up right about Romans 23, 22, 23, 24, right in there. Yeah. So we'll finish off Romans 3 next week, and then we'll continue on. We're doing it's taking us about 2 weeks per chapter. So
so maybe 100, 101. Well, that's what we'll pick up.
All right. Well, thank you. Shabbat shalom. Have a great evening.
Shabbat shalom.
If you missed today's show and want to watch it again or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all of the other live Lamb show archives on the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Stephanie Pavlantos, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.